timing could not be better for the telepathy tapes, right? Like
Sure. Yeah.
something like that, and I'm sure, yeah, your viewers know about the telepathy tapes. I'm sure you talked about them on here. I
Right.
think you did an episode, right? Did you have
No, I haven't, because I was supposed to get Ky on, so I've sort of
right,
waited to do a video on, but that hasn't really worked out. But granted, we texted and she gave me an email address to email to set up the interview, but then the LA
the
wildfires
fire, yeah,
happened and
yeah.
all this stuff, right? So it's like that's where they're at. So it's like, of course, they're probably dealing with that. So hopefully down the line, I can get an interview with her and talk about the telepathy tapes. No, the
I'm
vetted community is all about the telepathy tapes.
yeah.
In fact, I don't know if I've ever gotten so many messages, telling me to look into something ever,
Yeah.
period. The
And I
telepathy
had
tapes.
spoken with Dr. Diane Hennacy Powell. I touched base with her, and yeah, she seems wonderful, and her work is incredible. A few people in our community had interviewed her, and I highly recommend people watch the interviews with her. But
Yeah.
it's just like this to me is like the next step or level in disclosure, right? Is the psionics, telepathy tapes. This is, the crash retrieval thing is one thing. I mean, we still need to bring the general public on board. We're not done there, right? It's almost never done. It's like a outward spiral, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of on the inner
Totally.
aspect of the spiral, but the outer spiral is still doing its thing out there.
Sure.
It's going to be continuous cycles like that,
Yeah.
indefinitely, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
That's a good point.
I mean, even just something like that, right? Like I was listening to the telepathy tapes, and I was like touched and shocked how exact, like, some of the people in that podcast and their experiences matched exactly my own, but just mine was with non-human intelligence. But
Sure.
the sensations that they felt and the way that the telepathy worked sounded exactly like what I had experienced. So that's also validating for experiencers in a lot of ways. And well, if we can prove telepathy, all of a sudden these stories about people who have encounters with UFOs having these telepathic experiences makes a lot more sense,
No,
especially if we're
that's a
dealing
fair
with an
point.
advanced intelligence who could be facilitating it technologically, right?
Sure.
Like even with the
Yeah.
telepathy, I don't think there's anything magic about it, right? People think, oh, like, oh, just because it's out there, it's woo woo. You think they automatically assume, oh, it's some. They're claiming telepathy is some kind of magic, mind to mind magic. It's like, no, anything that happens in this universe, there's an explanation for. We just have to understand what and how that is, right? And that's the trick. Even Dean Radin said, Dean Radin's one of the most predominant researchers of psychic phenomenon. And he said, a lot of people didn't have problems with the results of the research she was doing. And the same with the CIA Stargate project, the CIA remote viewing project. What threw people off was not the results that were garnered by the psychic phenomenon that was occurring. The problem was they couldn't explain how it was happening, and that automatically killed the funding and other things, right? That's what makes it non-credible, not the results, but the fact that they can't explain the modus operandi of how it's taking place, and you need that in science. So,
I mean, that's the whole point of researching, is to
right,
that
right,
would, to me, that would seem like you would get more funding to figure out that problem. Like,
should be, right.
right? It should be. Yeah.
Um,
That's a good point. That's very interesting. For those that are watching and listening, the telepathy tapes are, I just want to explain it for anyone that may
yeah,
not know,
please.
right? It's a podcast series, right? That, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that involves nonverbal, autistic
Community.
community that allegedly can have a telepathic connection with their caretaker. In most instances, it's their mother, right? Is
Sometimes
that basically it?
sometimes a parent or a teacher or an aide,
Okay.
but people within their proximity, especially if they have a
Yeah.
relationship with them. But what's the even kind of bigger picture of that is that these uh, I don't want to even say kids, because I'll say nonverbal autistic community, because some of them are in their 20s and what have you.
Sure.
Um, is that they were all going to this place called the Hill, right? and they were talking to each other on the hill in this telepathic space, which we would
The hill
call,
was like a virtual
yeah,
hill, right? Yeah, yeah,
it's a non-local
yeah,
thing, and that non-local aspect of it is so important because it's not just mind to mind. There's this whole non-local field of reality that we all have the ability to tap into, and you know
yeah,
their condition limits them in the 3D body reality, but they have an augmented sense and sensitivity to this other non-local reality, which includes telepathy and all these other things.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great series. I've been listening to it. I'm not all the way through. Um, there's a lot of great interviews out there to watch about it, but yeah, I mean, so many people have talked to me about it. Like I can't think of one
It's
thing.
tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of one thing that so many people have talked to me about. The only concern that I have is anything that involves children. And I always don't, I never want to see children being exploited, and
Right.
anything that involves children, I'm very like, I hope
Sensitive.
it's always, yeah, it's sensitive, and I just always hope it's handled properly. It's like adults doing adult things all day long. Who cares? Freedom,
Yeah.
great. But the moment the children are involved, and I don't have kids, but I have nephews. I love them more than anything in this world. Literally, I would give my life tenfold to them for them. And the idea of somehow them being manipulated or exploited would, I just don't even, the words cannot express what that would do to me. So, but I have to say, after listening to the series myself, I don't really get any sense of that myself. So I was quite relieved, honestly. Like, okay, let's see what this is about. Remain open minded. Let's listen to this whole thing. And I do find it fascinating.
And
100%.
it's Ky Dickens. Yeah, Ky Dickens, and she
Ky
was
Dickens. Yeah.
Dickens. Yeah, sorry.
Hmm.
She was. She found Dr. Diane Hennacy Powell's work, and she started to investigate that. And you know, they're asking to do more research. They're not saying
Correct.
here's the proof. We proved it. Go away. They want to use this as a proof of concept, so we can say let's do this in a lab under scientific scrutiny, so we can
Yeah.
prove it.
Well said. That's a
So,
great caveat. Yeah.
and
Great point.
that's I think,
What's wrong with that?
yeah, right.
Right. Sounds
Like
good to me.
if
I'm for that.
yeah, if there's nothing to it, why not? Let's just
A
get it done and see it.
100%. Absolutely.
And
And
that
that's a great point. They're trying to make a documentary and do these scientific, like you said, in a lot. And I absolutely support that.
that's what they want to do for the documentary. They want to
Yeah.
do more rigorous science under scrutiny, basically,
Sure.
but where it's still where the kids or even some of the adults, right, are comfortable under the conditions, because you're putting them in kind of like a weird environment and whatever. So,
Sure.
but
Sure.
still, if have a skeptic design the tests, right, to some extent,
Sure. Sure.
and that kind of level of human potential, telepathy and stuff, the human potential aspect of that is just as important as like the UFO disclosure thing, right? It's like it's like side by side. They go hand in hand. It's almost
Yeah.
part of this whole new thing. I mean, I think Jesse Michaels said it on American Alchemy when he was interviewing uh, Dr. Powell, was that a paradigm shift is not just like this one thing, like, oh, UFOs are real, or telepathy is real. You have to. It's the whole thing. The whole world is a different place once you have this paradigm shift, from UFOs to telepathy to non-local consciousness to who we are, our
Sure.
potential, our place in the cosmos. All these things. It's a paradigm shift is like a whole world change, not just this one thing.